In this lesson, we're going to begin creating the major wrinkles of the pants. Alright, so let's go ahead and start up right here at the top of the pants. We're going to start creating some of the wrinkles that we would see from the form of the body. And so I'm using the standard brush. I'm going to go ahead and take my draw size down, and I'm going to come in. Let's turn off symmetry really quickly, and I'm going to create a couple of folds that we would see around the pants. And we're creating them a little bit differently from each side. You might actually get a wrinkle or two coming from the center where the seam would be here. Might get one here and maybe a couple tiny ones along in this area. Okay, we'll just kind of build those up, and then if you want, just kind of smooth them out on the edges. And then what happens whenever we hit Control D and we duplicate that, or excuse me, divide that, you'll see that the wrinkles show up here. So we want to kind of soften some of those up a little bit. We don't want these to be too pronounced, and you want them to fade really well back into the pants. Okay. Now let's go back down to subdivision. So hit Shift D to do that, and let's go ahead and take a look at the knees. You'll notice that the pants are pretty form-fitting, and I like them to be form-fitting at first because if I'm creating pants that really aren't supposed to be really baggy, keeping the surface of the leg is very helpful because you can see where the pants are going to be influenced the most. So most of the time you're going to get a lot of influence on the top of the legs, okay, on the thighs. You're going to get some compression lines along the knees, and then you're going to get these action lines along the leg. And usually what happens is the jeans tend to rest right on the front of the leg, even at a standing position. You'll get a few folds here and there across that, and then you're going to get a lot of compression right down here at the bottom. And the compression from that is because the jeans are hitting the shoe and causing the pants to fold up. And usually pants are a little bit longer at the bottom here. So let's go ahead and start blocking in around the knees for this. And normally what I like to do on this is just kind of start in with a standard brush, just like we did up here. And I'll kind of start to paint in maybe some different shapes that we might see. And usually these wrinkles are going to be more horizontal than anything. But just like we did with the wrinkles on the fingers, they're going to kind of crisscross and make different patterns and things like that. So we'll kind of bring that in, and it may come off the edge like that. And these are going to be really light wrinkles. Okay, they're not going to be overly large, but you're going to be able to just notice that they're there. Okay, so we'll kind of come in, we'll create a few here and there. And it's best to just try not to think about it too much. You know, go with what feels natural. Start out with a wrinkle and start to think about, okay, well, maybe there's another wrinkle that kind of comes along that kind of forces that that leg down. Okay, or it's going on the other side. Okay, so we've got a wrinkle that kind of comes like this and is pushing that down, which makes a lot of sense there. All the while smoothing out those edges, trying to make sure that that comes together pretty well, okay, with the rest of the pants. All right, so there we've got that. Now don't forget to dig in a little bit. So if you hold down Alt, kind of dig in underneath some of those wrinkles that are supposed to be a little deeper and a little bit more of a compression. You can dig in underneath that there, okay. We'll fade this wrinkle here. Okay, and then we'll get this guy to kind of puff out a little bit more, seeing how it's along the bottom of the knee. It makes sense that a harder wrinkle is going to kind of show up there. And we'll dig in up at the top of it. Okay, in between these two, and then just kind of smooth it out. Okay. And then I'm sure we're going to have one that kind of comes along the side just like that. And just kind of creating this crisscross pattern. And again, not trying to get too overly complicated with it. Just go with what feels natural and it looks natural. Okay, and again, it might help to have some reference images open just to kind of look at that. Just look at how the wrinkles, what direction they're going, not necessarily looking at the intensity of them. Okay, kind of fade that in there. All right, so I'm happy with that one. I'm going to let you guys do the other side in between lessons, and I'll do the same thing. I want to go ahead and move on into the rest of the leg here. We're going to have these action lines, and they tend to follow along with the surface of the leg. You'll get some of these folds and patterns to kind of lift up off of this, so you might get some folds that kind of come across the leg like this, and they might be a little bit of a deeper fold. Okay, so there's a little bit more fabric in there. And when you have something like this, you want to make sure that you're digging in as well, and then smoothing that out just to kind of give that a little bit more of an edge on that fold. Come across that again just to kind of raise that up. Okay, and then just soften it into the rest of the pants, just kind of create that transition. Okay, and then let's go ahead and create some lines that kind of go across the inside of the pants, pushing that down, holding shift, and then just smoothing that out. And I'm just kind of pushing in at the same time, just kind of thinking how that's forming to the leg. Okay. And then, you'll probably have some more compression lines coming down the side toward the front like this. Might have some bigger folds that begin to show up. Okay, kind of like that. And then, you might even have some kind of across the side of the leg here a little bit. But again, I'm trying not to get away from the surface too much, okay, because that can really start to change the overall style of the pants. Just dig into that a little bit. Oops. Make sure I hit shift before I start sculpting. Okay, I'm bringing that in there. Okay, just making them nice and subtle for right now. All right, now let's go ahead and start talking about the compression lines that you'd see at the bottom of the feet. And usually these are going to be smaller folds. And so I still want to use my standard brush. I'm going to take the draw size down. And with these folds, you're going to get things like these really horizontal folds. Let's take that down a bit further. Going to get these really horizontal lines, okay, like this. But then they'll start to create patterns. And so you might get something that comes down and then loops across and then comes back underneath and loops like that, okay, into another loop or something like that. Okay, so you're going to get some really interesting patterns, and these are going to be really sharp. Now you may have to bump up a subdivision level just to kind of get these mapped out a little bit better. But most of the compression lines across the bottom of the leg are going to be horizontal. Okay, you're really not going to get anything that's vertical in this. And if it is vertical, it's because it's all of one fold. So it's coming down and creating kind of this S shape like that. Okay. And then don't forget to dig into those areas because those are going to be really tight in between those folds. So hold down Alt and get that in there. Let's go ahead and hit Control D just to bring that up a subdivision. Actually, let's hit D first, and then I'll start to push that in, smooth it out. Do the same thing here. And this is just kind of blocking these folds out. Because then we'll come in with something like the Dam Standard brush and really start to play with the peaks and the valleys on this. Okay, really starting to bring those out. Okay, so you can see that the wrinkles around the foot create these nice compressions. You might go up a little bit higher into these folds on that. Now across the back on these compressions, you're not going to see quite as many. Okay, you might get a few here toward the bottom, but you'll notice that the fabric gets to go down a little bit further, and so you want to think about those compression lines, what they might look like. Okay, and then kind of realize, you know, there's not going to be quite as many. So I'll just kind of dig into this area. Okay, and then soften that a little bit, okay, as I go. All right, so there's that. All right, so what I want you to do now is I want you to come in, I want you to finish out this knee and this leg. We'll have both of those ready to go. You'll also want to take care of the back of the knee, okay, and this one's going to be very similar to what we saw on the bottom. So there's going to be these compression lines. It's going to be very horizontal, but they're also going to conform to the way the leg is curved. So you're going to get a couple of these like that. Let me actually bring the draw size up on those. Sorry about that. So you get something horizontal. You might get a line like this. Okay, one across the middle there, maybe a couple kind of overlapping, and then you'll get this wrinkle that kind of comes around, is trying to drape over the leg there, sticking with the shape of the leg. Okay, kind of like that. And we'll just smooth it out, especially on those edges. And then we'll kind of go over those and we'll dig in a little bit, especially right here in the center. These are going to be very compressed in this area. Oops. And we'll just smooth that out. And then in the next lesson, what we'll do is we'll have the other side finished, and we'll talk about cleaning these up and making them sharper and higher detailed. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll get into that in our next lesson.